Hey, it's Brad from Dronediculous. In this video, I'm going to give you my 5 editing tips to help you make better drone videos with your DJI Spark or any other drone that you have right now. Okay, the first tip I have is to export your videos from whatever software you're using at 24 frames a second. What that does is creates a cinematic view. When we watch movies, they're always in 24 frames a second. It creates motion blur. It's what we're used to. If you're exporting videos at 30 frames a second, they look clear and really crisp, and there's a lot of contrast. But it does kind of look amateurish, and it's going to look like a camcorder. It's not going to look like a movie. So to get that cinematic look, you want to use 24 frames a second. So let me show you in Adobe Premiere how we would set up a sequence of 24 frames a second. So you would go up to File, New, File, New, and Sequence, and you want to look for the digital SLR. It's just a quick preset that comes in Adobe Premiere. Digital SLR and 1080p 24 frames a second. So all of your DJI Spark footage is going to be coming in at 30 frames a second because that's all that the Spark can do. But when we export, it'll all be converted to 24 frames a second, which will give that motion blur. Okay, my second tip is to only use the best shots from your footage. So the Spark, if you're flying 2 batteries like I have, you're going to capture, 20 minutes of footage, and you're going to have tons of footage that looks cool to you because you flew it and you're remembering everything you did about your flight. But to the average viewer, they don't want to see all this panning around of you searching for your shot. So here you can see I'm trying to get a shot of my son and my friend and his son coming out of the trees here. So I'm looking all around. I'm flying. This is just going to be not very pleasing to the viewer, and they're just going to click away from your video. So just remember that you only want to use your best shots. So here they are coming out of the woods right there. And what I do is try to find a shot where there's no shakiness, no panning around. And you can see right here is I did a descent with a pan up on the gimbal. So right here is the one shot that I would drag into my timeline because I think that looks pretty cool. So that's the shot I'm going to keep. I highlighted that section. I'm going to drag that into my timeline. It's asking me if I want to keep the existing settings because, again, this footage is at 30 frames a second, but I'm dragging it into a 24 frames a second timeline. So now I have that first clip on my timeline, and that's all I'm going to use out of all of this other stuff. I mean, there's other clips I can pull out of there, but for this example, I'm just using the one that I just showed you. But all this panning around, we don't need that for our video. If we want to keep our viewers engaged, it's got to be your best clips, and that's what keeps people engaged in your video. Other than that, they're just going to think, oh, it's just another drone video, somebody flying around a drone, and they're just going to click away. And let's find another one in here. So you can see there's all kind of, here's a clip of me panning around again, trying to find them. Again, I'm not going to use any of that right there. I am going to use this next clip, which is just this pretty epic clip of the drone flying over them. So a little tip there, drone videos always look better with the subject in front of the frame. So the subject is the people here, and the background just puts everything in perspective of how big this bog is. So that's the clip. That's the next clip I'm going to use. So take an in point and an out point. I'm just going to drag that onto my footage there. So now we have, I'm just going to trim that off at the beginning so that the camera, so the drone's already moving into the next clip. And the end of this one, I'm just going to shorten that up so that we don't have any of that extra stuff I was talking about. And that's looking pretty good. What I'm going to do is slow that clip down. And just drag this out a bit. And right when he's about to slip on the ice, that's we're going to use that. Actually, I don't want him slipping on the ice. So you can see there's like a nice just cut between two shots. We have the gimbal descent and then the flyover. And because the first one's in slow motion, I'm going to put the other one in slow motion too. So we're going to make that 80%. So in your Spark, if you're shooting 30 frames a second, you want to set the shutter speed at 60, and that way you get smooth slow motion. On the Spark, you can only go down to 80%, and you can see how that's just flowing a lot better now. So we have slow-mo with the descent, and then flyover with slow-mo. So you can see how smooth that's looking now, and way more professional than just panning all around. All right, off to the third tip. Okay, third tip is cut your videos to music. So a lot of people obviously put music in the background over top of their drone videos, but if you actually cut the clips to the beat of the music, it'll make your videos even more professional and more engaging. Because subconsciously, when you're watching a video and you see the clips and it's cutting to the beat of the music, you get in a rhythm and you just keep watching it, and your viewers are going to be engaged a lot longer. So in this clip, I kind of cheated. I already had this lined up, but in Adobe Premiere, what you can do is zoom in on the audio clip and you'll start to see the waveforms, and that actually helps you line up where you want to cut these clips. So you can see this is the beat of the music, and this is right where I make the cut. So let's take a listen here, and you'll follow along on the play. Okay, so you can see that it's just cutting right to the music, and it makes it already right off the bat more engaging. So what I would do is just start dragging in the next clips, and you can start lining them up on these beats. So here's another clip that I found of the car pulling in. And we'll just drag that right into the next beat. And again, I just want to zoom in and make sure I have it lined up. So in Adobe Premiere, just for example, if I didn't have this stretched out, you put the playhead right on the beat and then drag your clip out to that. And then you can drag your next clip right on top of that. So that's going to be lined up without me even listening to the music. Okay, and then let's make this 80% as well, just so we have some fluidity with the same speeds of the clips. Let's take a listen to all three of these clips. So that third clip right here, it's not as obvious with this whole dropout on the waveform, but you can see this peak right here is going to be the next beat. So I would cut that there, and that would be the end of that clip. And I might make this 100% because he was already driving pretty slow and I was moving the drone slow. And let's listen to that. Okay, so that would be the third clip. Let's just find another random one out here. Looks like I found something before. Okay, so that's just a pan of the trees right there. We can line that up and find our spot here. I'm going to make that 80%. And let's take a listen to that. And then you can hear the whole music starts to kick in. That would be my next cut. Let's find one more clip. So we could go back to this. Here's a descent with these guys out in the bog. Looks like this is where I'm bringing the drone back, probably because the battery was getting low. But that was a nice wide shot descent of them out there in the bog. Can't see them, they're out here, but let's drag that in. We'll make that 80%. That's just an extra clip I have being pushed out. And let's see what that looks like. Okay, and then let's come together pretty good. Let's start from the beginning, just so we can see how everything's looking. All right, that's looking pretty cool. Just cutting to the beat of the music makes everything flow better, keeps your viewers more engaged. All right, on to the fourth tip. Okay, for the fourth tip, I'm going to talk about color grading or color correction. I'm just going to keep it as basic as I can. I'm not a professional colorist or super experienced color designer or anything like that, but there are basic things you can do in your footage to help make the footage pop. And my recommendation and requirement to get these shots is you have to be in manual mode when you're flying. If you're flying with auto exposure on the Spark, you're going to see all kind of changes in your color every time you move your drone camera in and away from the sun. You're going to get all kind of automatic exposure changes, and that makes it impossible to do what I'm about to do. Because all these, you notice all these shots, the exposure doesn't change no matter what I've been doing with the drone. So it was a really overcast day. It was cloudy. Obviously, it was even snowing. So everything's a little dark. And I'm not going to get into too much color correction, but I am going to show you a few things you can do to make your footage pop out a little bit. So the one thing I always do on this footage is just increase the saturation. I always end up going at 125. And you can see it brings out the greens here in the trees. So I put that back to 100. You can see it's a little dull, but if I bring that up to 125, it just makes it pop. Okay, so that's one of the things I always do. And then increase the contrast a little bit. And you can play with these sliders if you're using Adobe Premiere, but highlights is one of the big things that affects a lot of stuff. So you can see if I push the highlights all the way up, that's too bright. I just want to pull these highlights down a little bit. It will bring out the shadows and things like that in this environment here, this terrain, the beautiful terrain. And then we can look at the shadows here, and you can see that probably want to drop the shadow, because if I increase the shadows, it starts to wash everything out. So I'm just going to bring the shadows down. And then another tip, if you're using Adobe Premiere, you should always look at the lumetri scopes, and that'll tell you if your whites are washed out or your blacks are blown out. So you can see I'm peaking here at 100. That's the whites. So we probably need to drop the whites down just a little bit. And you can see now I'm right underneath 100, and that's okay. You just don't want to go over 100. Okay, so that clip is looking pretty awesome. So let's do the same one for the next one. You can see that the whites are out, but let's start with the contrast. Let's get the saturation up first. Just make that 125. Increase the contrast a little bit, bring down the highlights. And when you do bring down the highlights, you'll start to see the whites drop and the shadows. I'm going to bring those down. I'm going to drop this down a little bit more. And it's not enough to bring the whites down, so I'm just going to bring the whites down there. And that's looking pretty good. There, I could go way more into this, and you can see already, though, it starts to bring out this sky. It starts to bring out the background. You can also get into the curves here to add a little more contrast. So when you push up at the top, you're actually pushing the whites, and then the blacks, you're bringing that down. So I just want to do it ever so slightly on this clip, but that is looking good. So let's look at the third clip. Go back up to the basic correction. Don't forget about the saturation. And I want to increase the contrast, decrease the highlights and the shadows. And on this one, actually, I could increase the exposure a little bit because it is a little bit of a dark clip. Just a little bit, and I'm going to add a curve, add a sort of an S curve in here. And you can see already that is popping a lot better. Let's put a curve on this first clip. So that is looking good. Let's check out this fourth clip. Go to basic, increase the contrast, drop the highlights, drop the shadows, increase the saturation. And let's add a curve. And you could already see the trees are popping, the sky, it was overcast, never going to create a blue sky here, but that is looking better and better. And then this is definitely blown out, but we could fix that to the best we can. So we're gonna, you can see on the Lumetri scopes up here, the whites are blown out. I'm just gonna drop the exposure a little bit to get underneath 100. I'm still gonna increase the contrast. I'm gonna drop, I could drop the highlights all the way down. You can see how much better that looks. And I'm gonna drop the shadows. I'm going to increase the saturation to 125. And let's add an S curve as well. And all of a sudden you can see the colors that are in this bog without a lot. Okay. So that's before and that's after our corrections. So it's just pretty amazing what Adobe can do, Adobe Premiere. And let's look at what we did for this one, before and after. So that's before and that's after. Before, after. And before, after. So you can see everything's a little washed out, and then if we make some of those tweaks, we bring back the detail in the background. And this one, just, it's too white, and it adds all kind of detail in the trees. Okay, and again, you got to shoot in manual mode. Keep your ISO at 100 on a day like this. Put your shutter speed at 60, so it's double the frame rate. The frame rate's going to be 30 frames a second on a Spark. You want to set your shutter at 60 and then your ISO at 100. And then in order to do that on a day like this with how bright that white snow is, you're going to have to use an ND filter. So I was using ND filters. It's kind of like adding a sunglasses to your lens. Because I have the shutter at 60, it's going to add a lot of light in, but you're going to need to put the ND filter over top of your footage to get the correct exposure. So let's take a look at all these clips. Okay, there you go. And you can see it's a little bit blurry on my timeline because I haven't rendered these yet. So it's red up here. We can, you'll see in the final video that it'll be all rendered out and clear. All right, on to the last tip. Okay, the fifth tip that I have is to add some cinematic bars on the top and bottom of your footage, and also use a LUT if you would like. This footage is looking pretty good already without any more color grading or color correction, but you always can. And the way you would do that is, the best way to do that is so you can drag a look across all of your clips, is to create an adjustment layer. And you drag that on top of your clips and drag that out. And then we want to use the creative tab here, and this is where you can find all of your LUTs that you have. So I have a bunch of LUTs that I bought from Denver Originals color grading, but Adobe has a lot of looks as well built in. And a nice cool thing is you can get into a certain section here and then just look for a LUT that might look pretty cool. And the nice thing is, once you have your basic corrections down, color corrections, it's easy to make the LUT work on top of all your clips. But you can see I'm choosing, so if we choose this Kodak look here, it creates this sort of a Kodak moment, old time sort of Kodak camera look. It looks pretty cool. And then if it's too intense, you can drop the intensity down. Usually they are a little bit intense. But that looks pretty cool. And I just chose it randomly. But because I did the basic color corrections, it makes it a lot easier for the LUT to work over top of everything else. I use the LUTs just for that color. Helps me adjust the color quickly. So find another example here. GH4 Cinelink D2. It looks like that's whoops, let's stop that over here. So let's look at some other clips here. Other LUTs, I mean, sorry. And one, if you notice, if you're out on the internet looking at LUTs, the famous one is the M31 LUT. That's the blue, orange, teal look. And so that's what that looks like. I've used that a lot. It looks pretty cool. And again, sometimes the intensity might be a little too much, so you could drop that down to like 35. And there you go. So without that, you can just see it. It makes the colors pop. The orange, especially he's wearing an orange jacket, so orange and teal, these blues are just going to pop out more when we turn that on. It's just subtle, but it allows you to just do some color changes without having to go crazy and do all that manually yourself. So another thing that we can do to make it a little more cinematic is to put those bars, cinematic bars on the top, and all that is we're adding a crop to the adjustment layer. And then we want to go to the effects tab, and I put 10% at the top and 10% at the bottom. And then when you export your clip into YouTube or wherever, you're going to have these cinematic bars. And right off the bat, it looks like you're watching a movie, like a movie screen, widescreen on your TV or movie theater. Just gives that dramatic effect. And if something's not lined up right because of the bars, you can adjust that. So you can see he's going to get cut off here because of the bar. So what we can do is raise that up. Whoop, or the other way. Okay, so now he's not cut off at the end of the clip. And the same with that. At the end of the clip, I might want them to stay a little higher up in the shot. So I'm going to move that up. So that one's okay. Same with this. I'm going to move this up because we want to get a little bit more of that white piece of ice right there. And then same with this. I might want to smooth that up a little bit so we don't have so much sky. We want to have more of the bog. That's looking pretty good. Maybe increase this LUT just a little bit more. All right, great. That's the last tip. Cinematic bars and adding a LUT to your look to play with different looks of what you would want your overall footage to look like. And if you have the basic color correction done on all the clips, you can choose between any of the LUTs and they're going to look pretty decent. It just basically comes up to what kind of look you want, what you're going for. All right, that's the last tip, cinematic bars and LUTs. All right, I'm going to render this video out. Thank you so much for watching. If you thought this video helped you, please subscribe to the channel, and I look forward to making more for you. If you have any questions, leave a comment below. Please give me a thumbs up, a subscribe, and I look forward to making more videos for you. See you soon.